Okay, in this video, we are going to take an extensive look at lines, linear functions, all that kind of stuff, and how it might show up on the SAT. We're going to go through a ton of practice questions. Knowing how to do this stuff is really the key to shoring up a really good score on the exam. So first of all, for lines, you definitely want to know that y equals mx plus b. And we'll talk more about that in a second, but sometimes instead of y, you're going to have f of x equals mx plus b. So the y and the f of x, same thing, slightly different notation. In this form, m is going to be the slope, and to calculate slope, we're going to have m is equal to delta y over delta x, or the way that I've always said it, it's rise over run. And so if you have two ordered pairs, x1, y1, and x2, y2, then you can calculate the slope by doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then additionally, so that covers m in the form y equals mx plus b. So that coefficient of x is going to be your slope. It's delta y over delta x, rise over run, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. These are all things you need to know. That covers m pretty much. So then b in this form is the y coordinate of the y-intercept. And our y-intercept is going to be the ordered pair 0, comma y. It's really important that you remember that. To find a y-intercept, you let x equal 0, and then you figure out what y is. So that's the form of the equation that primarily will show up. We also want to know what this thing just looks like graphically. So we have two scenarios for the slope. So the slope could be positive or the slope could be negative. And then we also have two possibilities, I guess technically three possibilities for the y-intercept. It could also be 0, but that would just go through the origin, so I didn't cover that here. If the slope is positive and the y-intercept is positive, you'll be up here, right? So the y-intercept will be above the x-axis and your line will be increasing as you go from left to right. If your slope is negative but the y-intercept is positive, you'll be above the x-axis but decreasing as you go from left to right. And then you can have a positive slope and a negative y-intercept, and you can have a negative slope and a negative y-intercept. So take a look at those four pictures and just kind of like engrave them in your brain. You really need to have a handle on this. You can tilt the lines a little bit, but they have to stay with their positive slope, negative slope. Knowing what those four look like is going to allow you to answer a ton of questions that show up on the SAT. Additionally, in this picture, I would probably add in the y-intercepts, right? So the y-intercepts are just where you hit the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, the up and down axis. So the y value where you hit that axis, is the y-intercept. All right, so this is some background information. Now, two types of questions that you will frequently be asked involving slope are about parallel lines and perpendicular lines. So I think it's important to cover those and make sure that you definitely know those as well. The first one, parallel lines have exactly the same slope. So if you can write your equations in y equals mx plus b, they will have the same m value. So here's a little picture. These are parallel lines. I just made up equations for these. Y equals 3/5 x plus 6, y equals 3/5 x minus 4. Those are parallel lines because they both have a slope of 3/5, right? The coefficient of x is the slope. The second possibility is that you can have perpendicular lines that you will be asked about. So perpendicular lines have slopes that are opposite reciprocals. Opposite reciprocals. So let's take a look at what that means. So if the slope of one line is 6/5, the slope of the perpendicular will be the opposite, so negative, the reciprocal, 5/6. So the slope of the perpendicular will be negative 5/6. Flip the slope over, put a negative in front of it. But if you start off with a negative slope, say your slope is negative 5, you're going to take the opposite reciprocal. So you take the opposite of negative, which is positive, and flip the slope over to get 1/5. So the slope of the perpendicular will be positive 1/5. Opposite reciprocal slopes give you perpendicular lines. In a picture, that could look like this. And then, I don't know, if this is 7/3 x plus 5, then the perpendicular will have to have opposite reciprocal slopes. So negative 3/7, and then, make up whatever you want. I don't actually know if I guess that's possible. I don't know. Just look at the slopes. I shouldn't have put y-intercepts there. The y-intercepts of those two lines are 0,5 and 0,12. Always be thinking about the stuff that you have to remember. All right, now what we're going to do throughout the video is I'm going to tell you a concept, I'm going to talk about it, and then I'm going to do basically every problem I could find from the 2022 QAS exams. Those are the question and answer service, the ones that when you take the exam, you can then buy how you did on it. I don't know if I recommend that you do that because you can usually find them on the internet, which is what I've done. But anyway, we're going to do every problem I could find from 2022 that applies to these concepts. So let's get started for this. All right, first problem is from April 2022, no calculator, it's number 1. The function f is defined by f of x. Remember, that's just another way of writing y equals 9/2 x plus 1. What is the slope of the graph of y equals, what is the slope of the graph, right? So the slope is the coefficient of x. In this case, it is 9/2. So our answer here is definitely D. The next question, March 2022, calculator section, number 6. Frequently on the calculator section, I would say almost all the time on the calculator section, I don't use a calculator. I don't know why they break them down the way that they do, but you do not need a calculator for many of the problems. So this one says, the function f is defined by f of x. Again, that's just y equals 2x minus 4. What is the y-intercept, right? So it's y equals mx plus b. B is the y-coordinate of the y-intercept. Also, if you look at the answer choices, all of them have x equals 0. So no matter what, you're going to take 0 and plug it in here. So we can see that -4 is the y-coordinate of the y-intercept, and so our answer has to be D. Next question. The equation of the line K is y equals 7x plus 2. What is the slope of a line that is parallel to line K in the xy plane? So remember, parallel lines have the same slope. So you start to see, like, just by knowing certain little things, you're getting a lot of information. Parallel lines have the same slope. Slope is the coefficient of x, so 7. So our slope would be 7. That was a fill-in question. Next up, October 2022. The line K is defined by y equals 2x plus 14. Line J is perpendicular. So that's the key, right? Perpendicular. And then we want to know what the slope of line J is. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So you should just say that in your head when you see it. The slope of the given line is 2. So if that is 2, then the slope of the perpendicular is the opposite, so negative, reciprocal, 1/2. Negative 1/2 is A. So you can blow through a lot of these. This is how you sure up a good score on the exam, right? So make sure you are great at this stuff so that you have more time on more challenging problems. March 2022, number 17, no calculator. H is defined by y equals -8x plus 7. What is the slope of a line perpendicular? Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So if the slope here is -8, the slope of the perpendicular will be positive 1/8. Opposite of negative is positive, reciprocal is 1/8. That was another grid-in problem. March 2022, number 12. The line K is defined by y equals -x plus 5. J is parallel, so parallel lines have the same slope. So if the slope of this is -1, the slope of the answer will also be -1. So we get this. All right, let's look at a couple more. May 2022, the graph of linear function is shown. What is the y-intercept of the graph, right? So think back to those 4 that you kind of memorized. The y-intercept is where this line hits the vertical axis, which is there. That is the point 0, 2. I mean, the y-coordinate is 2. Again, look at the answer choices. All of them have x equals 0, so you don't have a choice about that. And you should know that it's 0, comma something. But 0, 2 is going to be our answer. Again, from May 2022. P is defined by 2y plus 4x equals 9. So this one's a little bit different because we weren't given y equals mx plus b. I'm going to recommend you put this into y equals mx plus b form. The line R is perpendicular to the line P in the xy plane. What is the slope of line R? Okay, so we're looking for perpendicular, but we don't have y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to start with this. I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. I get y equals -2x plus, you could write 9/2, you could write 4.5. That number actually doesn't matter for this problem, so you could not lose any sleep over it and just move on. The slope of our given line, therefore, is -2. And then the opposite reciprocal will be positive because the opposite of negative is positive. The reciprocal of 2 is 1/2, so we will get positive 1/2. And that was another grid-in problem. Okay, so that's all of the problems I could find that were pretty much strictly y equals mx plus b, parallel, perpendicular. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next concept. I lied. There's one more in this section. Okay, so this is also from May of 2022. It is question number 2 from the no calculator. The function f is defined by f of x equals x plus 3. What is the y-intercept? So we know y-intercepts are when x is equal to 0. We take 0, we plug it in, or y equals mx plus b. B is the y value of the y-intercept. Looking for y-intercept, it's definitely 0, 3. We get a lot of mileage out of knowing a little bit about lines. We're going to know everything about lines at the end of this, but this is a ton of questions. All right, the next idea that we're going to look at is substituting the right thing into a line. If you think back to a couple problems we've done, we've already taken 0 and subbed it in for x multiple times. These are usually like pretty straightforward. They just explicitly tell you what to plug in, or they will ask for the y-intercept where x is 0, or the x-intercept where y is equal to 0. So let's keep that in mind as we do these problems. So first one, March 2022. The function g is defined by g of x equals 4x minus 2. What is the value of g of negative 3? That just means take x and replace it with negative 3. This is calculator, so you should probably do this on your calculator. I tend to do these by hand because I think I'm a little faster at that. But also, I'm not taking the exam for a score, right? So you should be using your calculator. Don't even risk it. I know that the math here is not super hard. We're just replacing every x with a negative 3. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12 minus 2 is going to be negative 14. That's going to be our answer, but use your calculator. In May of 2022, we had a very similar problem. F of x is 9x minus 16, and we want f of 3 this time. So it's going to be 9 times 3 minus 16. 9 times 3 is 27, minus 16. 27 minus 16 is 11, but please use your calculator. So that's going to be C. October 2022, we had basically the same question again, and it's calculator again. The function f is defined by f of x is 17x plus 13. Even I would probably use a calculator on this one, to be honest, because I don't want to risk it. I need to do 17 times 8 plus 13. 17 times 8 is 136 plus 13. So we are going to get 149, but you should be using a calculator to do these. If you're on the calculator section, arithmetic should almost certainly be done with a calculator, unless it's super straightforward. All right, so next up, March 2022, calculator. Again, what is the x-coordinate of the x-intercept of the line with equation 5/4 x plus 2/3 y equals 1 when it is graphed in the xy plane? All right, the y-intercept is when x is equal to 0, and that is a much more common question. Y-intercept, x equals 0. X-intercept is when y is equal to 0. So we're going to just let y equals 0 in the equation, and we will get 5/4 x plus 2/3 times 0 is equal to 1, which means 5/4 x is 1, or x is 4/5. So it's still a straightforward question, but you had to have that additional piece of info. When you're not sure about x-intercepts, go back to what you know about y-intercepts. To find a y-intercept, you let x be 0, so an x-intercept will be when y is equal to 0. I can't stress it enough. Like, I do a lot of math, and I sometimes have to rethink that because I have dyslexia, and I often confuse x and y. I also often confuse left and right. A lot of problems there, so I always go back to what I have hard-coded into my brain at this point. Y-intercept, x equals 0, which means x-intercept, y equals 0. All right. Next up, I found a problem in October. So this is c of x is 5/9 quantity x minus 32. The function c gives a temperature in degrees Celsius that corresponds to a temperature of x degrees Fahrenheit if a temperature increased by 19.8 degrees Fahrenheit. So x is the temperature in Fahrenheit. So we're saying if the temperature increases by 19.8 degrees Fahrenheit, how much did the temperature increase in degrees Celsius? Disregard the degree symbol when entering your answer because this was a grid-in question. So what I did was I basically found C of 32. You can literally do this with any two numbers. I chose 32, and then 32 plus 19.8. I just increased the temperature by 19.8. Now, I did not do this by hand. I did it on the calculator. So my answer here is 11, right? Because I went from 0 degrees Celsius to 11 degrees Celsius. You could pick any number you want for x. Pick negative 50, pick 3,000. It doesn't make a difference. Plug it in. then add 19.8 to it, plug it in, see what you get. The difference is going to be the answer. I use a TI Nspire when I do my problems. I defined C of x, and then I just let the calculator do the work. I did C of 32, and then C of 32 plus 19.8. But again, 32 could have been any number. I chose it so that the first thing would be 0, right? The first output. You could have chosen anything you wanted. So these are basically the problems that I had found about subbing in directly. I mean, this concept will probably come up again as we can continue through, but these are the most like explicit ones. So now we're going to move on to another topic. So our next topic is writing equations for lines. I think this is kind of a big topic. I found a lot of questions that I decided to classify as this. So the two main things that you want to keep in mind. You already know y equals mx plus b. You are going to use that extensively as you do these problems. There's another form of a line that is also very useful, and it is the form ax plus by is equal to c. We'll do a couple of problems like that. This one is super context-based, so as you read a problem and look at the answer choices, you will realize that you need to use this form. So let's dig in, do some of the problems that have appeared on previous tests. October 2022, number 7. Line L has a slope of -3, so they're telling you m, and an x-intercept, so that is not the y-intercept, x-intercept of 9/2, 0. What is the y-intercept of the line L? So we're being asked for the y-intercept, and we know a y-intercept is of the form 0b. Now, because we know that a y-intercept is of the form 0b, we actually know that we can cross out a and c, because the question is what's the y-intercept, and a and c do not have 0 as the x coordinate, so those can't be the answer. So now we're just down to b and d. I actually think you could answer this without like really doing the problem. And the reason I think that is if you kind of just place the x-intercept that you're given at 9/2, 0, and then draw a line that you think is the answer. This line here that I've drawn, I would say also would have a y-intercept of 0, 9/2. So I've drawn a line that has kind of a slope of -1 there. The other line, so if that line has a slope of -1, then the line we're looking for will have a slope that's like more extreme, right? Like -3, which is the one we want. And the y-intercept of the line we want is definitely higher than the y-intercept of the line with a slope of -1. So the answer would have to have been D at that point. But maybe you don't like that, right? So if you don't like that, we can do the problem using y equals mx plus b. We know m is -3. We know an ordered pair, right? We have the ordered pair 9/2, 0, which means we can just plug that in, right? Y is equal to 0, x is equal to 9/2. Also, this is a calculator problem, so like feel free to use your calculator on this. I didn't, probably should have. I get this. And so I'm getting that b is 13.5 or 27/2, which is still D, which is what I was expecting. But either approach will work. I don't know that I explained the first approach the way that I would have liked to, but it is the faster approach. But anyway, just dive in, do it the way you know how to do a problem. All right, the next problem is going to be from May of 2022. It's number 1 on the non-calculator. I actually think this is kind of a hard first question, but let's read through it. A certain university offers courses that are either 3 credits or 4 credits per course each semester. A student registered for a total of 16 credits for the fall semester. Which equation represents the possible number of 3 credit courses, X, and 4 credit courses, Y, the student could have registered for? So you might just read this and immediately know the answer. I'm going to take you through it in case you don't know how to do that. So what I'm thinking is 3 credit courses are X. So let's just play around, right? Sometimes you can answer a question by playing with it a little bit. So if you took a 1 3 credit course, that would have been 3 of the credits. If you took 2 of them, that would have been 6 credits. If you took 3, it would be 9. In general, it's going to be 3 times X credits going toward 3 credit courses. You do the same thing with 4 credit courses, which are Y, right? So if you do 1, it's 4, 2 is 8, 3 is 12. Overall, you're doing 4Y. So the total number of credits you're taking is 3X plus 4Y. That has to add up to 16. So 3X plus 4Y should be equal to 16. That's got to be our answer. The answer is B. Now, because it has to add up to 16, if you read through the answer choices, if you're one of those people, you read through the answer choices first, you would note that the 16 has to be what they add up to, and you could have quickly eliminated A and C. And then you look at the answer choice, and you're like, one of them is 3x plus 4y, the other one is x plus y. Like, why are they doing this, right? Like, why is the 3x plus 4y there? Think it through. You get the answer really quickly that way as well. Don't be afraid to use the test, right? It's not really a math test, it's the SAT. Take advantage of everything they give you. All right, let's look at some more. April 2022, number 18. This is non-calculator. Graph of a line in the xy plane passes through the point 6, 2, crosses the x-axis at the point 10, 0, which is just another ordered pair. The line crosses the y-axis at the point 0, b. What does the value be? They're asking for the y-intercept, right? So we know 2 points, so we can figure out slope, right? It's change in y over change in x. So I'm going to do 2 minus 0, which means I then need to do 6 minus 10, because you have to stay in the same order. So that's going to be 2 over negative 4, so negative 1/2. Now we know y equals mx plus b. And if we know y equals mx plus b and we just figured out what m is, we know that y is negative 1/2 x plus b. We also have another ordered pair that we can use. We're looking for 0b. We know the ordered pair 10, 0. 10, 0 means plug in 0 for y and 10 for x. 0 equals negative 1/2 quantity 10, or negative 1/2 times 10, plus b. So 0 equals negative 5 plus b. B is equal to 5. The question was, what is the value of b? That's our answer. So y equals mx plus b, and knowing how to calculate slope comes to the rescue there. Another problem that I found, March, number 15 of the calculator section. I don't really think a calculator helps you here, but maybe it kind of does. Just depends on how lost you are, I guess. You could like take each answer choice and like plug in kind of the given information if you were inclined. All right, let's read it. Table shows the results of a survey. Average amount of money, D, in dollars. So average amount of money, D, consumers would be willing to spend on a product at their corresponding age, A, in years. So A is in years. This is A. So that's identifying our columns is kind of important. Which equation represents this linear relationship? So you look at this and they're all solved for D. So that means that D is going to go on kind of like the y-axis when we graph this thing. So I'm going to like pretend to graph it. So on the y-axis will be the money spent, and on the x-axis will be age. So we get this. Now, if you look at the table, you can see that as your age increases, you're just willing to spend less, which means this should have a negative slope. As age increases, as you go to the right, the money you spend will go down. So we should have a negative slope, which means you can look at the answer choices and eliminate C and D because they have positive slopes. So now we just have to choose between A and between B. Between A and B. I'm going to actually calculate the slope, I guess. So if I look, I want to do change in D over change in A, right? Because it should be change in Y over change in X, but in this case, Y is D and X is A. So delta D over delta A. Just like look, right? You go from 42 to 36. That's a drop of 6. And then you go from 25 to 28. That's an increase of 3. So the slope is negative 2, which makes our answer A. So this is how you can like dissect these problems, think them through, make sure you know y equals mx plus b, and don't get flustered. So more problems. There's a lot of this type of problem. And frequently they have a lot of words. All right, so question 25 from April 2022, calculator section. Store W's total expenses for selling and installing 4 tires is $100. That's their total expenses. Also, store W, because the chart gives us stuff about W, X, Y, and Z. Those are the stores. We only want W. So all we care about is this top row here. Well, the second row. Expenses for selling are $100. Which function represents the profit, P of A, in dollars from selling and installing 4 tires to which the store's discount is applied? Then they just tell you that profit is going to be total amount of money received minus expenses. We know expenses is $100. So we are looking for profit. So we got to figure out how much money they take in, which would be the total amount of money received. And then we will subtract expenses, which will be 100. And that'll give us our profit, our P of A function. All right, so in this scenario, we read through, we say, store W has a list price of $8 per tire. If you buy 3 tires at list price, so you're going to pay for 3 of them, you get the 4th tire free. Then they're going to charge you $50. So you're going to give them $50 to install the tires. So you end up giving them 3 times the price of a tire, so 3A, plus $50 to install. You get that 4th tire free, but you don't really need to worry about that. So you only pay for 3 tires at $8 per tire, 3A, plus you hand them $50 to install. That's how much money you get. And then their expenses are 100. So we do what they get minus their expenses. That should give us P of A. So P of A is going to be what you get, which is 3A plus 50, and then minus expenses, so minus 100. So I think we get 3A minus 50. And this is like a weird problem. I mean, I don't even know. Like, I classified this as writing the equation of a line because all those answers look like linear functions. I kind of think this is just like a random thing. But anyway, I mean, like, if you're thinking about linear functions, you can kind of get through this one. The thought process is very linear. All right, let's look at the next one. March 2022, number 1. Okay, so in the 1884 U.S. presidential election, candidates James Blaine and Grover Cleveland received a total of 401 electoral votes. So if you add up the votes they both got, it would be 401. The number of electoral votes for Blaine was B. Nope. The number of electoral college votes Blaine received, B, was 37 fewer than the number of electoral college votes Cleveland received, C. Which system of equations represents this situation? Okay, so we have to like dissect the problem, right? There were 401 total electoral college votes. Look at all the answer choices. Only 2 of them have 401 in them. So I would eliminate the ones that don't because I think that is just extra like weird, wrong answers. B is going to be Blaine. C is going to be Cleveland. So we know that B plus C must be 401, right? Because there were 401 total votes and people either voted for B or they voted for C. So B plus C is 401. So we can eliminate these. So now we're just down to C and D. We need to figure out what's going on here. Is it B equals C minus 37 or B equals C plus 37? So what I'm going to say, Blaine received 37 fewer votes than Cleveland. So if Cleveland had gotten 100 votes, right? So if C was 100, then B would have been 37 less than that. It would have been 63. But in general, B would just be whatever Cleveland got minus 37. That's how I would work this out. Even with all the math that I know, that is how I would work out this problem. I would pick a value for C, I would subtract 37, then I would say, oh, I get the relationship. It is that B is equal to C minus 37. So we get C for our answer there. Next problem that I found, also March 2022. A limestone stalactite grew in length at a rate of 1/8 of a millimeter per year. At this rate, how many years would it take for this stalactite to grow a total of 4 millimeters? So sometimes when you read a problem, you don't realize that it's about linear functions. But this definitely is, right? Because you're going at a rate per year, millimeters per year. In general, when you see blank per blank, it's kind of a linear relationship for the most part on the SAT. So a limestone stalactite, I'm going to call that S, grows at a rate of 1/8 of a millimeter per year. So 1/8 of a millimeter per year. I'm going to call years T. So I think what this is telling me is that S is going to be 1/8 times T. That's the amount that this thing grew. So if you go for 2 years, you would grow 2 times 1/8 millimeter. If you grew for 10 years, you would do 10 times 1/8. You just got to think it through and make sure that your equation makes sense. I think that makes sense to me. But then the question is, how many years would it take to grow 4 millimeters? So I want S to equal 4. I want my growth to equal 4. So 4 is going to equal 1/8 T, and then just multiply both sides by 8. Although this is calculator, so you could have used your calculator, but T is definitely 32. That's a grid-in problem. And I got one more that I thought fit into this category of writing equations. So this is from October 2022. It's number 20. It also requires an additional piece of information that I will say as I do the problem. But the circle shown has center -1, 1. Okay. The line T is tangent to the circle at 4, -3. Which of the following points also lies on the line T? All right, so the additional piece of information that you need is that The tangent to a circle is perpendicular to the radius. So this is really a question about perpendicular lines. But first, I'm going to need to figure out like what's going on at all, right? So it's a question about perpendicular lines. I need to use that. Then I need to figure out points on this line. So we're using perpendicular and we're writing the equation of a line and we're probably subbing into that line. So it's like they all start to mix and match. So it was hard to sort them, but let's see if we can do it. So if you look at the line and you just plot some of these points like 0, 5/4, there is no chance that that is on that line. So I'm just going to cross it off. I also think that 3, 6, if you plot it roughly correctly, 3, 6 would be like here, I think. But anyway, there's no way that it's on the line. So like 3, -6, I'd have to pause and think like maybe that could be on the line. 3, +6, no chance. Those are out. So now you have 50-50 anyway. So like, why not guess it, right? But you don't have to guess because we're going to do the problem. So now we're doing some math. The line that we're looking for is perpendicular to the line that I've just drawn. So I'm going to find the slope of the line that I just drew by using the slope formula. So I need change in y over change in x. I'm going to do change in y. I'm going to do -3 minus 1, which means I need to put that over 4 minus -1. And so that's going to give me -4 over 5. Okay, so that's the slope of the perpendicular line. We want the line perpendicular to that, which will have a slope that is the opposite reciprocal. Opposite of negative is positive. Reciprocal of 4/5 is 5/4. So the slope that we are looking for is 5/4. Now I'm going to use y equals mx plus b. I know that m is 5/4, so I really know y is 5/4 x plus b. I do know a point that we go through, right? We go through the point 4, -3, which means y is -3, x is 4. So -3 equals 5/4 times 4 plus b. This gives us -3 is 5 plus b. And then we subtract 5 from both sides. B is -8. So we actually know the line. Y is 5/4 x minus 8. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the two answer choices and just like plug in their x coordinates and see what y coordinates I get. I don't want to plug in 9. So I'm going to plug in 8 and hope it's the answer, which I'm pretty sure it will be because there's no fraction in the answer. And plugging in 9 would give me a fraction. So if I plug in 8, so at 8, 2, I'm going to get 2. Does 2 equal 5/4, the quantity 8, and then minus 8? So that's 40 over 4 is 10. 10 minus 8 is 2. And 2 does equal 2. And so that is our answer. Our answer here would be C. All right, so there were a lot of questions of that type. What you want to do is you want to go through even older exams, and you can find them on the internet, and do as many of these as you can. That's going to help you out. That's it for this type of question. We're going to move on to what I think is the next type of question. Okay, on to our next topic. Identifying an equation from a graph or a graph from an equation. This gets mixed up with some of the stuff that we've done previously, but again, I had trouble classifying them. I don't know what the proper breakdowns are for these. But there are two things that we're going to do. We're going to use the slope extensively. In particular, is it positive or negative? And then we're going to use a y-intercept for the most part. And the y-intercept should be 0b. It's where you hit that vertical axis, the one that goes up and down. And we had this picture before, so take a look at that. That should be in your brain. You want to always be thinking of that picture as soon as you're dealing with a question about lines at all, right? Especially if there are graphs provided. So we're going to blow through a lot of these. There are a lot of examples of this as well. It's a very common question. All right, so March 2022, no calculator. Number 3, which of the following could represent the graph of a linear function or equation, y equals mx plus 3, where m is a positive constant? Okay, so m is a positive constant. Which of these have positive slope? More particularly, which ones don't, and cross them out? Negative slope, gone. Now we just need the y-intercept to be positive, right? And if we need the y-intercept to be positive, it's above the x-axis. The answer is C. This is why you need to master this concept. You will definitely run into problems like this, and you should do them in like no time. Move on, bank that time for harder questions. Next up, April, no calculator, number 3. What is the graph of 3x plus 4? Y equals 3x plus 4. All right, so first up, 3x, positive slope. Get rid of anything with a negative slope. Now you need a y-intercept of 4. Turns out they both have a y-intercept of 4, so that's not super helpful in this case. So we go back to the slope, which needs to be positive 3. We look at, I don't know, I'm going to look at C because I think it's the answer because it's like a little steeper. If you notice the scale is going by 2s, like every tick mark is 2. So that's 2, that's 6. That gives you a slope of 6 over 2, which is 3. That's your answer. For part B, or option B, you go over 6 and up 2. That would be a slope of 2 over 6, 1/3. So the answer here is definitely C. Next up. In Chicago in 1895, some guy won America's first race. There's like so much information here that I'm going to read to you. The only thing that's important is y equals 5x. That's it. So he drives 52.4 miles in 10 hours and 23 minutes. If you drove at a constant rate, you could, and y is miles during the race, can be miles. Y equals 5x. That's all that mattered out of this entire thing, which is the graph of y equals 5x. There you go. All right, y equals 5x has a positive slope. So because of that, we can definitely get rid of this. Y equals 5x also has a y-intercept of 0, and you can see option B does not. So that is gone. Now we are going to need to use the slope and do some calculations. So make sure when you're doing slope, you look at the scale. So for A, you're going over 2, you're going up 10. That gives you a slope of 5, 10 over 2. That's going to be our answer. If you try to do that for D, you go over 2 and up 20. That gives a slope of 10, which is too big. So you look at the things that you want to look at, and then you might need to actually calculate slope. But from a graph, that's not so bad. Just do a delta y over delta x. All right, let's look at another one. The mass y in grams of juvenile cobia fish X days after hatching can be modeled by the equation y equals negative 324 plus 5.6x, where x is between 60 and 100. Which graph represents this relationship? All right, so we do our thing, right? We have a y-intercept and we have a slope. So if 5.6x is positive, you can immediately eliminate C and D. It's fantastic. When you use the slope, you can almost always eliminate 2 options. It's great. Then you try to rely on the y-intercept. There's sort of an issue here, like only sort of, like I don't really know. The y-intercept is supposed to be negative. I think because of that, you could definitely eliminate B because just look at it. Like if you continue that graph, it's going to hit in the positives. So I think that A is the answer because if you continue that graph, it looks like it's going to hit in the negatives. The issue is there's that little gap in the line in the x-axis there between 0 and 60. It's not really representing the whole graph. So what I did in a very bad color, in my opinion, is I just took 100 and I plugged it into the function. So add x equals 100, you get negative 324 plus 560. Also, this is a calculator problem. So negative 324 plus 560 is, I said it's just about 240. And you can, 240. And then if you look at the 2 graphs, on option A, when x is 100, you get about 240. On option B, when x is 100, you get like 800 or 900 almost, right? So the answer is definitely A. I think you could have gotten it earlier, but it's a question of, are you looking for an 800 on the exam, or are you just flying through to try to get as many as you can, right? Like if you have the time and you can do it, it's worth it. Otherwise, I do think you could have been 100% confident that you can eliminate B as an answer choice. It's up to you. Like I've mentioned before, I'm not taking the exam for a score. I'm kind of taking it for fun, and so I can explain the problems to you. You have to make the choice, but I want to provide you with all the options of the ways that you can do it. All right, next up, April of 2022. This will be number 9. There's a lot of this type of question, by the way. Like this is, you got to get good at this. All right. The graph shown models the relationship between the distance d in kilometers from Earth and the moon at time t in millions of years after the present. I didn't even read the question when I answered this. I just like looked at the y-intercepts and I looked at the slopes and kind of eliminated answer choices. Like look at the graph. It has a positive slope. Look at the graph. It has a positive y-intercept. You have a positive y-intercept, which means the answer could not be A or C because those have negative y-intercepts. And then This thing definitely has a positive slope. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't matter because only one answer choice left has a positive slope. The answer is definitely D. So that's a good example of where sometimes I don't read the problem and I will get it wrong occasionally because I didn't read the problem. But here we were given a graph and we were given a bunch of options and I was like, I can do this without reading the problem. I never even read the problem. That's a bad idea. You should read the problem. Next up, October had a problem like this. So the graph models the relationship between the area of a rainforest in square miles and the predicted number of flowering plant species P found in that area. What equation represents this relationship? So they're all solved for P. So look at this. It definitely has a positive slope, but they all have positive slopes. I think this one's going to 100% just come down to calculating the slope. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say, you got to pick something convenient. Like I want to use where it actually hits, where like the vertical and horizontal grid is coming together. So I'm going to choose to go over 40. And then by doing that, I have to go up 15,000. And now I got to work this out. This was non-calculator. So I have 15,000 over 40. Just knock a 0 off of both of those and you have 1,500 over 4. So then I was like, they're both multiples of 2. So I'm going to divide both by 2. And I get 750 over 2. And then 750 over 2 I know is 375. But also look at the answer choices at that point if you're not really sure. You got to choose between 200, 375, 500, 750. You can be sure it's not 200, 500, or 750. So it has to be 375. So you can like indirectly do that calculation if you don't like doing arithmetic. I don't know. The arithmetic doesn't really bother me, but I'd prefer to avoid it if I could. More problems. March of 2022. The graph of the linear function is shown. Which equation defines f? We look at it and we say to ourselves, f definitely has a positive slope and a negative y-intercept. In fact, the y-intercept is at -8, right? So 0, -8. So y-intercept of -8 eliminates b and d. And then we just have to work out, is the slope bigger than 1 or less than 1, right? Because we have 3/2 and we have 1/3. So let's just do it. You go over 4, you go up 6. So make sure you're counting correctly based on the units that are shown. So that 6 over 4 is 3/2. So our answer is definitely A. The graph, this is May of 2022. The graph of the linear function is shown. Which equation defines P? So again, you go to the y-intercept right away. That's 5, so you can eliminate B and D as answer choices. And then you look, and they both have negative slopes. This is essentially the same question. This is part of why studying and doing practice problems is so important. The questions repeat, right? I mean, basically, they just kind of change the numbers. So we need to calculate slope again. Here, you're going to go over 1 and down 3. That gives you -3 over 1. Slope of -3. The answer is definitely A. All right, we got more. We got a bunch more from this type. Whoops, I don't know what I just did. Okay, yeah, here we go. April of 2022, scatter plots. So with scatter plots, my recommendation, just draw a line through them, right? So there you go, there's your line. Which of the following could be an equation? So now based on our line, we know that the slope is going to be negative and that the y-intercept is going to be like 30 something, right? So the y-intercept is like 30 something, so you get rid of A and B because those y-intercepts are 7 and -7. I don't know. Yeah, -7 and +7. Those are gone. You also just have a negative slope. So since you have a negative slope, the answer has to be D. So you can choose to eliminate in either order. You could do slope first, which is maybe the better one, and then y-intercept. It doesn't make a difference. Just be aware that you can always use those for process of elimination. Then sometimes you do need to calculate the slope. If you end up with two choices that both have like negative slopes or positive slopes, you're going to have to actually calculate a slope. You'll see that this question type shows up again. Which of the following could be a line? Draw a line that like roughly goes through the points. You can be pretty off on this line and still get it because they're not going to give you answer choices that are super close because you're not actually finding the line of best fit. You're just kind of guessing it. So using the same sort of logic, the y-intercept has to be about 6, not -6. And so these are out. And then you definitely need a negative slope. So since you need a negative slope, the answer has to be A. So we're going through them. We're doing the same thing over and over. That's what I'm trying to point out to you, that these questions exist over and over. Let's keep going. A procedure allows, this is the same question. Which equation goes through these points? Let's draw it. All right, so I'm thinking that the y-intercept is like basically 0. But key, the y-intercept is not 10 and the y-intercept is not 90. There's no way. So those can go. So now I need to calculate a slope or approximate a slope. This one I'd say is a little bit trickier, but it is calculator, so you don't have to worry about this fact. But read the axes correctly, right? So the x-axis goes by 0.1s or 1/10. So we're going over 1/10, and then you go up by 10. So our slope will be 10 over 1/10, or approximately that, because I just drew in that line, and that would give me 100, which is a big slope. And so of the two choices, I have to choose between a slope of 90 and a slope of 10. I'm going to choose 90. So I'm going to say my answer is A. We did have to approximate, but you can see it's not close enough to worry about the fact that you're approximating. Just draw your line and think about what your line tells you, and then choose the answer closest. Next. And actually, I think this is the last one from this type, and then we will move on to another type. So the function f is defined by this. What is the graph? This is like old school, right? So the y-intercept is 6. Which can we eliminate based on that? We can eliminate b and d because they have a y-intercept of 0. And then the slope is positive 2. So we can eliminate c, or we can just choose a, whichever one you want to do. So that's big time. That's a concept that comes up a lot. Those were all the problems I found in 2022 that I thought were that concept, but also we probably did some prior to that. So we are going to move on to the next topic. Okay, our next topic is interpreting graphs or functions. And so I'm going to say that there are really two things that you mostly have to do here. The first one is you have to find a point on the graph. So they'll give you enough information to find a point. They'll either give you the x value or the y value, and you need to find the other one. Or they will basically ask you to understand the slope of the graph. So we're going to take a look at some problems and see how this kind of manifests or shows up in these things. So first one, October 2022. The line models the relationship between the body weight and foot length for a group of infants. Based on the model, what is the predicted weight in kilograms of an infant with a foot length of 9 centimeters? So foot length, you can see, is on the x-axis. 9 is directly between 8 and 10. I'm just going to draw a vertical line going up from there. So there, and then I'm going to go across until I hit, the y value. So go across, you can see that that's going to be at 7. So the ordered pair is 9, 7. That's what they're asking you. If x is 9, what is y? So the answer there is 7. Do that a lot. March 2022. A research institute conducted phone and mail surveys. The total cost of conducting the surveys is $5,000. So that's the total cost. The line shown models the possible combinations of phone and mail surveys the institute could have conducted. According to the model, what was the cost for each phone survey conducted? So I want to know how much a phone survey costs. So ideally, there would be no mail surveys. I would do all phone surveys, and then I would just do 5,000 divided by that. There turns out to be a point there, right? So cost for a phone survey, let's do 0 mail surveys. That tells me I will have 125 phone surveys if I do 0 mail surveys. So I'm going to take the total amount, which was 5,000, and just divide it by 125. So you have a couple of options here because 5,000 divided by 125 is annoying. So one option is to know that in every 1,000, there are 8 times 125. 8 times 125 is 1,000. So we have 5,000, so we'll have 5 times 8, so it's going to be 40. Another option is to just multiply up to a convenient number. So for example, 4 times 125 is 500. I'm going to try that. I'm going to multiply by 4 over 4, which is going to give me 20,000 divided by 500. I can knock 2 zeros off in the numerator and the denominator, which gives me 200 divided by 5, which I now know is 40. You can do that math either way. The answer is definitely 40. All right, next problem. There aren't that many of this type, but I think it's an important type. So let's keep going. So April of 2022, number 4. Graph represents the total charges in dollars by a contractor for X hours of work. Okay, so total charges and then X hours of work. So the slope of this thing is going to be the units of the y-axis, which are dollars, over the units of the x-axis, which are hours. So dollars per hour. And then the question is, what is the interpretation of the slope? It should be dollars per hour, how much they make in money per hour. So option A is the contractor's hourly rate. That would be what they make per hour. That's going to be the answer. One-time fee would be the y-intercept. Total amount, maximum amount just do not make sense. Those are just, they need 4 choices, so they provide them. All right, next up. This is a question without the answer choices I think I would get wrong because I kind of don't really understand the question, but I can answer it on the SAT, and that's what matters. So g of x is this thing. The given linear function models the annual percentage increase in the population of India X years after 1990. So we just need to understand that because the question is, what is the best interpretation of g of 20 equals 1.376? Well, I know how to interpret a linear function, right? So X years after 1990, and then we're doing g of 20, so X must be 20. So we're 20 years after 1990. Look at the answer choices. The first one says 1.376 years after 1990, and so does the second one. Those can't be the answer because that's not the interpretation of that 20. So now we're down to C and D. So now I need to know, like, what is this function's output? The function's output is the annual percentage increase in the population. So if we look at the answer choices, choice C says the percent increase in the population was blah over the previous year, whereas D says India's population was approximately 1.376 times its population in 1990. I don't know where you would get that from, so I am going to choose C as my option. So that's where you can use your knowledge of linear functions to really help you answer these questions. Let's look at the next one. Questions 10 and 11 refer to this graph. They provided the linear function. Certain school district, 36 high school students were selected during October. I don't think we really need any of that. The line of best fit underestimates one student's reported average time spent using the internet on Saturdays by more than 2 hours. So it underrepresents it, which means the actual is way above. So this question was guaranteed to be about either the point that is farthest above or farthest below. In this case, the line underestimates, right? So it's the one that is farthest above. So look for the one farthest above. I think it's the one at the top of this, so the one that's at 1.5 comma 5. And then the question is, for how many hours did this student report reading? So reading is on the x-axis and time on the internet is on the y-axis. So what is the question here? For how many hours did the student report reading? Oh, that student was at 1.5 comma 5, 1.5 hours. That's the answer. So you have to look at the line. You have to find the point that is more than 2 units away from that line. And so it's got to be the one that's farthest away because otherwise they wouldn't be able to really ask the question. And then just figure out what the x value is for that particular y value. According to the line of best fit, if a student spends an average of 1.25 hours reading reading offline on Saturdays, which of the following is the best estimate of the time the student would be expected to spend using the internet on Saturdays? Okay, so this is saying I'm giving you X. So it's like in number 10, the previous one, they were giving you Y and asking you what X is. Here they're giving you X and asking what should Y be? So 1.25 is kind of like here. The Y value of the line is somewhere between 2.5 and 3. So that's the amount of time they should be on the internet, according to this. So something between 2.5 and 3 would be our answer. The answer is going to be C. All right, and then we've got, oh gosh, hold on. I just really messed up. And then we have, here we go. Okay, I'm trying to look so that I don't talk, I want to talk intelligently about the problems, and I scrolled my PDF way too far. All right, so some related problems. Here we go. Questions 5 and 6 refer to this. Dakota and Alex work as babysitters. For each babysitting job, Dakota charges $10 per hour plus a flat fee of $5. Alex charges $8 and a flat fee of $4. But question 6 is about Dakota. So Dakota, flat fee of $5 and then $10 per hour. Which of these graphs could be hers? Flat fee of 5, which means the y-intercept should be 5 because that is not a slope. That is a y-intercept. So let's eliminate. Can eliminate both of those because they do not have a y-intercept of 5. Then she charges $10 per hour. So that's a slope of 10. We have to work out some slopes. So here, if we go over 1, we're going to go up 10. That's a slope of 10. That's our answer. On C, if you go over 1, you go up 15, which would be a slope of 15. And that is obviously not the answer. All right, so those are the ones that I could find that were about this topic. We're going to move on to the next topic. So the next topic is systems of linear equations. There's a couple things you need to be able to do with these for real. The first one is solve the system, which will mean find x, find y, or find x and y, the ordered pair. The next thing is make a system have 0, 1, or an infinite number of solutions. That comes up kind of a lot, actually. So let's dive a little deeper into that. If a system of equations has 0 solutions, that means that the lines that are in the system are parallel to each other, which means they have the same m value but different b values if you're looking at y equals mx plus b. But also, if you're in that other form, it will look like this. This is worth remembering. You will have ax plus by equals c, and you will also have ax plus by. So the exact same thing equals a different number. So that is worth remembering. That will be parallel lines. I think that's one of those like weird SAT things, like put that in your brain, bring it with you to the exam. You could also have one solution. One solution just means you have different slopes. So we'll like figure out m for both of them. And if they're different, then they're going to intersect at some point. You will get one solution. Infinite solutions means essentially you just have the exact same line twice, but on the test, they will have written it so that it looks a little different. Like maybe they multiplied everything by 2, or maybe they rearranged it. Those are the things that we're going to have to deal with. So let's take a look at some problems. There's quite a few of them. All right, April 2022. The solution to the given system of equations is the ordered pair xy. What is the value of y? So make sure you're always looking at what they're actually asking you for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the system, and I see that I need to figure out what y is, right? So if I need y, I want x to cancel. I can do something kind of clever with this particular system. Since I have negative 3x on the first one and I have 4x on the second one, if I multiply the first equation by 4, that'll give me negative 12x. If I multiply the second equation by 3, that'll give me positive 12x. And then those will cancel when I add them together. So I'm going to do that. I'm not going to show the work. I'm just distributing correctly, right? Everything times 4. And then I'm going to distribute the 3 to everything. So you get 12x minus 9y and 1.5. So we have this. Now what I'm going to do is add these two together. So the x's will cancel. I'm going to get 16 minus 9 is 7y, and then I'll get 17.5. So that means that y is equal to 17.5 over 7, which I think you could grid in. Another option is to double everything here and get 35 over 14. Another option is to write this as a decimal. I'm going to do that in a weird way. I'm going to write it as 14 plus 3.5. And the reason I'm doing that is because it's divided by 7, and 14 divided by 7 is 2, and 3.5 over 7 is 0.5, so I know that this is going to be 2.5. Any of those would be acceptable grid-ins, and it's a grid-in problem. Let's look at the next one. X plus y is 10, x minus y is 4. We want to know what 2x is. So this is similar to the last one, but actually a little bit easier, because if I just write these down and add them, I'm going to get 2x. The y's are going to cancel. So I get 2x is 14 because we're adding. So x, oh no, the question is what is 2x? I probably would get this wrong because I would probably solve for x, get 7, grid that in, and not get an 800. But if you are reading the problem, you know it is asking for 2x, and I am bad at reading the problems. Next up, March of 2022, number 18. The solution is xy. What is the value of x? So I'm going to do the same sort of thing that I did on the first problem that we looked at. I'm going to try to make y go away. So y has a coefficient of 2 for the first equation and 3 for the second equation. So I'm going to multiply the first equation by 3 to get 6y, and the second equation by negative 2 to get negative 6y. And then I can just add them together. So that's my game plan. I'm looking for x. So 3 times the first equation will give me a 6y. Negative 2 times the second will give me negative 6y. When I add those, they cancel. That's the dream. So let's do that with correct distributing. So I get 3x plus 6y is 33. Negative 6x minus 6y is negative 48. I'm going to add down. So my idea when I'm trying to solve these systems is always that I want to end up adding them together. So I get negative 3x is negative 15. So I now know that x is 5. Check the problem and make sure that's what they're asking for, right? The previous one asked for 2 times x. You don't want that to be the reason that you don't get the score that you were hoping for. Read the problem before you grade it in. Next up, October, question 21. We're given this. What is the value of y? This again is just set up. If we just add these together, the 3x and the negative 3x are going to cancel. So let's do that. Let's set them up. Add them together. We're going to get 2y, and then 6 plus 9 is 15. We're asked for the value of y, so y is going to be 7.5. Next up, October, number 3, what is a solution? So what is a solution? You can see by the answer choices that x is definitely 4. I'm just going to take 4 and plug it into the second equation. So you get 4 over 4 and then plus 2. So you get 1 plus 2, which is 3. So the answer here is 4, 3. Straightforward. Don't waste time on it. Another one from the same test. In the given system of equations, p is a constant. The system has no solution. So this is where you got to go into that mode. What does it mean for it to have no solutions? Parallel lines. What is the value of p? P is the slope of the second line. We know that we should have parallel lines, so p must be 3. That's the only way you're going to get parallel lines out of this. Next up, one of the 2 equations of a system is given. 2x minus 3y is 5. The system has an infinite number of solutions. All right, so infinite number of solutions means you're looking for something that is the same equation but written differently. Which equation could be the other equation in the system? So if you have 2x minus 3y equals 5, then you're still going to have 2x minus 3y equals a number, or you could potentially have negative 2x plus 3y because they could be tricky and multiply by a negative. But either way, 2x minus 3y, you can't have a plus in between them, so we can eliminate the 4x plus 6y and the 2x plus 3y. Those are gone because they have a plus in between them, and no matter what happens, we will need to have a minus sign. So now we just have to decide, is it 4x minus 6y is 10, or is it 2x minus 3y is equal to 10? Well, 2x minus 3y equals 10 would be parallel lines. That can't be it. So the answer is A. But you could also look at A and just like say, I could take a 2 out of everything here, and I would get 2x minus 3y is equal to 5. And that is the original. So either way you approach it, you're going to get A. Number 15 from March. One of the 2 equations is given. We have no solution. No solution means parallel. And parallel in this form would mean ax plus by is c and ax plus by is d. So we're looking for 2x plus 2y equals some other number. If you look at all the answer choices, that's going to be d. Next up, we have 4x minus y is equal to 3. And one of the 2 system equations is given. One solution is going to mean that you have different slopes, right? That's anytime you're looking for one solution, different slopes. 0 solutions, parallel. Infinite solutions, same line. So here we need different slopes. So I'm going to calculate the slope maybe of these. I mean, if you think about it, 4x minus y shows up in the given problem. If that shows up in another one, the slope's going to be the same because in both cases you subtract 4x and then divide by negative 1. You're going to get a slope of positive 4, but 4x minus y can't be there. So I'm going to cross out anything that has 4x minus y. If you look at A, it also secretly has 4x minus y. Multiply that by a negative, and you get 4x minus y is negative 6. That's, again, going to have the same slope. So 4x minus y equals any number will have the same slope. So our answer here is definitely C. And we got one more that we're looking at from this particular type. How many solutions does a given system of equations have? So we're looking to see, is it different slopes? Is it the same slope and y-intercept? Or is it whatever the third option is? So these, you have 2x plus 6y equals 2. I'm going to divide that second one by 2. It's kind of written funny. So we have 2x plus y is equal to 10. So we have 2x plus 6y equals 2. 2x plus y equals 10. Those definitely, if we solve for y, would get different slopes. These have different slopes, which means there must be exactly one solution. Option C is ridiculous. A system of linear equations cannot have 2 solutions. So C you could eliminate right away. So that's like a ton of problems of this type. And it's all that I found from 2022. So we are going to move on to the next type of thing we'll have to do. Okay, our next topic is going to be linear inequalities, mostly from graphs from what I can tell, but also sometimes you were given the equations. I would say that on these, you pretty much exclusively just have to test points. So these are kind of a lot of work, I guess, from that perspective, but they're never really super hard because all you're doing is plugging in. So for example, in April, with the calculator section, which ordered pair xy is a solution to the given system of inequalities in the xy plane? So what I did was I just started plugging in. So if x is 0 and y is 2, then for the first equation, I would have 2 is less than 4. That is true. So then I want to test the second equation. So 2 is greater than 4. That is untrue. So I'm just plugging in, I'm plugging into the first equation. You get 2 is less than 1/2 times 0 plus 4. 2 is less than 4. And then you get 2 is greater than -2 times 0 plus 4. 2 is greater than 4. That's false. So that can't be the option. And then I just keep going. So I plug in 1 and 0. So 0 is less than 4.5. True. And then you get 0 is greater than 4. That is false. Then we have 5 is less than 4.5. That's not true. So you can cross that out. The answer is D. Don't even check it. You did all the work. Why waste the time? The answer has to be D. But if you did check it, it would work out. Similar question from May of 2022. Which ordered pair xy is a solution to the given system of inequalities in the xy plane? I'm going to do the exact same thing. So 3 is less than 7. 3 is less than 7. So then I check the other one. 3 is less than 1 plus 1 is 2. That's not true, so that's out. Then we move to the next option. 2 is less than -2. False. We move to the next option. 2 is less than 1. That is false. The answer is D again. Maybe you should start on D for these problems. I don't think you can draw that kind of conclusion from the finite number of problems that we get to see. But I mean, in that particular type, maybe. Here's another type of thing you have to do. The shaded region shown represents the solutions to which inequality. It's really the same deal, except instead of giving you options, you have to choose a point and plug it in. So I'm going to choose 0, 0 because it's the easiest point in the world. I'm going to plug it in and see what happens. So for the first one, I get 0 is less than or equal to -3. That's not true. For this, I get 0 is greater than or equal to -3. That is true, but it is not necessarily the answer because for other ones, we could get kind of the same relationship, right? So let's keep going. We get 0 is less than or equal to 3, also an option. And then we get 0 is greater than or equal to 3, definitely not true. So now we're down to B and C. But we have to decide which one's the right answer. If you look at this, so we could test another point, but I don't know. What am I going to just keep doing this forever? I'm going to choose to use the slope because you have 3x minus y and then you have 3x plus y, right? I'm just going to pretend that it's an equal sign and find myself the slope here. So this would be 3x, and then I add 3 to both sides, add y to both sides. 3x plus 3 is equal to y. That is a slope of +3. And then this one, I would have y is -3x plus 3. That is a slope of -3. Clearly, the answer has a positive slope. The answer is B. Let's look at this one from October 2022. The shaded region shown represents all solutions. It's basically the same thing, except they give you options, which is fantastic because we're just going to check them, right? So I'm going to plot them. So 5, 0 is going to be here. That's in the interval, so that's the answer. You're done. But I mean, you could check the other ones if you're not sure. It turns out that they're all the intercepts, which is super good. Or they're all intersecting the axis, I should say. But the answer was A, and in the interest of time on the exam, I would have chosen that and moved on, although it is suspiciously easy. So maybe I would have checked the other ones anyway. Those are really all the examples I could find, but I mean, it's kind of one per released exam per year, so it's something you got to understand. I think you can handle this topic by picking points and plugging in, or looking at the answer choices and testing them. So we will be moving on to the next, and I think the final linear equation function topic that I thought I could find. Okay, the last topic that I think I could classify these all into was scatterplot / line of best fit problems. I know we ran into these before where we were drawing the line of best fit, but this is where they give it to you. and ask you a question. Also, I get this type of question wrong all the time because I just don't read them closely enough. So I really recommend that you read these closely and make sure you're answering exactly the question that they're asking. So here's the two types of things they pretty much will ask you. For how many, so they'll say like, for how many of the points is this true or that true? Make sure you read really carefully. That's what gets me. I tend to not read it carefully enough. And then they will say either greater or less, right? So for how many is the prediction greater? For how many is it less? You've got to read carefully. So let's see if we can do these. April 2022 on the calculator section, but a calculator is not going to help you here. Scatter plot shows the relationship between two variables, x and y. For how many of the data points does the line of best fit predict a greater y value than the actual? So it's predicting a greater value, which means the line is above the actual value. And then you just count them. So they're not hard problems. I get them wrong because I don't read carefully enough. And I don't know, if I were actually taking the exam, I'd like to think I would read more closely, but I bet I wouldn't. So learn from my mistakes, right? So the answer is 3. It's a grid-in. This is October, and it's basically the same question. Scatter plot shows relationship between x and y. Line of best fit is also shown. For how many of the data points does the line of best fit predict a greater y value than the actual y value, right? Greater than the actual y value, which means the line is above the point. So 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. 4, it's a grid-in, gridded in. Oh no, that's multiple choice, so choose the correct option. All right, the next one. Scatter plot shows the relationship between two variables, x and y. A line of best fit is also shown. For how many of the data points is the actual y value at least 1 greater than the predicted? So 1 or more units above the given line. 1 or more. And you can see each grid line is counting by ones, right? They labeled every other one, but each grid line counts by 1. So we want to be 1 or more above the line. So at this point, you are definitely 1 or more above. This one, it's close, but since it's 1 or more, you are definitely 1 or more above. The answer here is 2. Now, the scale on that one was 1. You have to really look alive on these because they like to get you with the scale of these things. So check the x, check the y. Scatter plot shows, this is from March, it's 25. This is calculator again, but it's not going to help you. A line of best fit for the data is shown. Which data point has an actual y value that is 2 more than the y value predicted by the line of best fit? So 2 more, so above, by 2 units. But look at the y-axis. We're counting by 2s. So the scale here is by 2s. So we just want to be 1 box above. That is the point that is 1 box above. The trick answer, I guess, would be 3, right? At 3, you're 2 boxes above, but each box is 2 units, so you're 4 units above. So the answer here is definitely the point that's at 5. The answer, I think, is 530, which should kind of clue you into the fact that the scale is a little off because, that doesn't feel like it should be 30 when you're just 28, 29. It's why isn't it 29? It's 30 because you're going by 2s. So really read carefully. These are all just questions about reading carefully, but I wanted to really highlight them because I get them wrong all the time. It's these are the questions I get wrong when I'm going over my answers. All right, so then we've got May of 2022. This is actually the last question that we'll be doing. I think we did 60 or 61 problems. It's a lot of problems. So this applied to 37 and 38, but that's okay. At a certain location, the velocity of water flow at different depths was measured. The scatter plot gives 11 measurements of the velocity v in feet per second of the water at various depths d in feet. A line of best fit is shown. Okay, so then the question is, according to the line of best fit, what is the predicted velocity v of the water in feet per second at a depth of 4? So that's just finding a point, right? So the depth is 4, so just go up, go over. The answer is 1.2. It's a grid-in, so gridded in. For what fraction? So this is a little twist. This is basically a problem that we've done multiple times, but now they're asking for the fraction, which is another reason I personally would probably get it wrong. What fraction of the data points in the scatter plot is the velocity of the flow predicted by the line of best fit greater? So is the velocity greater, which means the line is above the actual point. The prediction is bigger. The line is above. So if the line is above, we just have to count where that happens. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So 5, but don't grid in 5, right? Because the question was what fraction? They actually tell you, fortunately, that there are 11 measurements. So our fraction will be 5 out of 11. And that's it. Those were all of the problems, I should say, that I found from 2022 that I thought had to do with linear equations, linear functions, linear inequalities, systems of linear equations, linear inequations. What are even those? But that's it. That's the whole thing. I hope this was helpful, and good luck.